The village of Oak Ridge, hidden between dense forests and imposing mountains, has always seemed like a place where time passes more slowly, allowing life to flow with a rare serenity. The residents' routine, marked by small gestures of courtesy and days that repeated themselves like an endless cycle, had as its central point the local church, St. Mary's. There, faith was not just a belief, but the foundation that held the community together, an invisible force that guided each step of the inhabitants. At the heart of this church was Father Michael Donovan, a figure who, over more than 10 years, had become synonymous with morality and piety in Oak Ridge. With his eloquent sermons and a demeanor that radiated confidence and peace, he was more than a spiritual leader. It was a beacon amidst the uncertainties of life. His words, always filled with wisdom that seemed to transcend his age, found an echo in the hearts of everyone who heard him. Among the faithful, he was especially loved by the women of the congregation, who saw in him a father figure, a confidant, someone in whom they could trust their most intimate secrets and their deepest pains. It was in this environment of deep reverence and respect that Emily Carter entered the scene. At 35, Emily had recently lost her husband in tragic circumstances, a blow that left her helpless and searching for comfort. St. Mary's Church became her refuge, a place where she could find peace amid the internal chaos that afflicted her. Her presence at Masses soon attracted attention, not only because of the frequency with which she appeared, but because of the aura of sadness that surrounded her. Discreet and with an unshakable faith, Emily avoided drawing attention to herself, preferring to remain in the shadows, where she could pray in silence, hoping that God would hear her prayers and ease her pain. However, in a community as small and tight-knit as Oak Ridge, nothing went unnoticed. People, always eager for a story that broke the monotony of everyday life, began to notice the closeness between Father Michael and Emily. On the surface, it seemed like a spiritually supportive relationship, something completely expected and even commendable. But it was during a quiet Mass, when the morning sun filtered through the colorful stained glass windows of St. Mary's, that something aroused the curiosity and suspicion of an anonymous observer. This individual, whose identity would remain a mystery, saw what appeared to be a simple glance between Father Michael and Emily. However, that look, which lasted just a second longer than necessary, carried a charge of emotion that the observer was unable to ignore. It was as if there was a connection between the two, something that went beyond words, beyond mere friendship or spiritual support. And so, like a spark among dry chaff, a rumor began to take shape. The rumor, initially whispered within the walls of the church, soon found fertile ground in the minds of Oak Ridge residents. Each word was carefully chosen, each sentence constructed to instigate doubts without, however, directly accusing. Could Father Michael, the man everyone revered, be involved in something untoward? Could Emily, the discreet and pious widow, be succumbing to an unacceptable temptation? What was once an isolated assumption began to spread like a disease, contaminating the community's perception. The inhabitants of Oak Ridge, conservative to the core, did not tolerate moral deviance, especially when it came from someone in a position of authority like Father Michael. To them, the church was a sanctuary of purity, and any stain on that sanctuary was a direct attack on the way of life they so cherished. The influence of the church on everyday life was immense, and Father Michael was seen as the pillar that supported the structure. But now, this pillar was beginning to show signs of fragility. As the rumor gained momentum, the atmosphere in Oak Ridge changed in subtle but noticeable ways. The look that was once one of admiration towards Father Michael became one of suspicious curiosity, and the interactions with Emily, previously marked by sincere condolences, began to be tinged with a veiled distrust. The words of comfort he offered during his sermons no longer had the same impact, and Emily's silent prayers, once seen as an expression of her pain, now seemed to hide something darker. It was as if a shadow hung over the village, a shadow that no one wanted to recognize, but that everyone felt. And so, what began as a simple glance turned into a harbinger of something much bigger, something that threatened to shake not just two people's reputations, but the very foundation on which Oak Ridge had been built. And as the whispers intensified, the village unconsciously awaited the moment when the truth would finally come out, bringing with it consequences no one could have predicted. What began as a discreet whisper, an innocent conversation among faithful after Mass, quickly took the form of a devastating rumor. At first, it was just vague speculation, a casual comment that no one took very seriously. But in a place like Oak Ridge, where the quiet routine fueled an insatiable thirst for novelty, those words soon turned into a relentless stream of gossip. Within days, the village was buzzing with the suggestion that Father Michael, the man everyone trusted blindly, might be involved in an affair with Emily Carter. The rumor, at its core, was shocking. How could Father Michael, known for his unwavering devotion, allow himself to fall into such a worldly temptation? How could Emily, a woman who had found solace in the church after her husband's death, betray everyone's trust like this? For some, this idea was inconceivable. For others, the suspicions seemed to fit together in an alarming way. And so, the village, once united by faith and tradition, began to fragment. On the one hand, there were those who vehemently defended Father Michael, believing that he was the target of a misunderstanding or, even worse, of malicious slander. These people saw Emily as a lost soul who had been wrongly drawn into the eye of the storm, a victim of circumstance. On the other side were those who preferred to believe the rumors, for whom appearances of morality could very well hide a corrupt heart. For them, the closeness between the priest and Emily was evidence enough that something was deeply wrong. For Emily, the change in community behavior was devastating. She, who already carried the burden of grief, now found herself ostracized by those who previously offered her support and comfort. Some women in the church, who had once hugged her after Mass, now avoided her, their once supportive looks replaced by a biting coldness. Emily felt the weight of judgment around every corner, in every familiar face that now treated her like an outcast. Determined to face the situation, Emily decided to seek answers. On a cold, silent afternoon, she headed to the rectory. The walls of the small stone building, which had once seemed so welcoming, now seemed to bear witness to his humiliation. When he met with Father Michael, his words were hesitant but firm. She wanted to know the truth, not just for herself, but for everyone who was being poisoned by the lies that were circulating. The priest, with his usual calm tone and soft voice, denied the rumors with conviction. He explained that his relationship with Emily had always been strictly pastoral, a matter of spiritual guidance, nothing more. But when he saw Emily's tears, he couldn't help but comfort her, offering words of comfort and a fatherly hug. This scene, however, was witnessed by curious eyes that did not see the purity of the gesture, but rather a confirmation of the rumors. The news that the priest had embraced Emily spread quickly, like a match lighting a fire. The community, already divided, was now on the brink of chaos. The whispers at Mass became louder, the looks more suspicious, and the environment that was once one of worship was now transformed into an emotional battlefield. Father Michael, who had always managed to maintain his composure under pressure, now began to feel the heavy burden of unspoken but clearly perceived accusations. He felt that his congregation was moving away, and this caused him deep pain. However, The real blow would come on a Sunday, the day Oak Ridge usually found a moment of peace at morning mass. That morning, however, something was wrong. Emily didn't show up at church. For Oak Ridge residents, this was more than strange, it was alarming. Emily was always among the first to arrive. Her reserved seat in the second pew, now empty, an ominous sign that something had happened. The murmurs of concern quickly turned to panic when it was discovered that Emily hadn't been seen since the night before. His disappearance seemed to confirm everyone's worst fears. Where was she? And, more importantly, what had happened to the woman who was at the center of so much controversy? The village, which was already shaken, now found itself plunged into a whirlwind of fear and uncertainty. Unanswered questions hung heavy in the air like a storm about to break, and everyone in Oak Ridge, in one way or another, was waiting for the next move in this disturbing game of secrets and mistrust. Emily Carter's disappearance was like a bolt from the blue, shattering Oak Ridge's apparent serenity and plunging the village into an unprecedented state of alert. Shortly after news broke that Emily had not been seen since the night before, the police were called to investigate. In a place as small and traditional as Oak Ridge, where everyone knew everyone, and the doors were rarely locked, the arrival of authorities brought a sense of uncertainty that soon turned to fear. It wasn't long before Emily's disappearance became the main topic of discussion, dominating all conversations on the streets, in homes, and, ironically, even in church. At the center of this whirlwind of suspicion was Father Michael. The rumors, which had previously been just malicious whispers, now turned into implicit accusations. For many, it was difficult to ignore the sequence of events. First, rumors of an alleged affair, and now, Emily's unexplained disappearance. People began to put the pieces of the puzzle together in a way that, to them, seemed to make sense, even though there was no concrete proof. The atmosphere of Oak Ridge, once filled with devotion and routine, was filled with palpable tension, as if everyone was waiting for the revelation of a secret that no one wanted to hear, but that everyone feared was true. Father Michael, for his part, tried to remain calm and continue with his duties, but it was clear that the pressures were starting to get to him. He continued to declare his innocence, but the coldness in his parishioners' gazes, the silent questions, and the murmurs that followed him like shadows were harder to bear than he had imagined. Gradually, his confident, calm demeanor began to give way to a restless reserve. He became increasingly withdrawn, his homilies less warm, his interactions briefer and more distant. This change in behavior, instead of dispelling doubts, only served to fuel them. The community, which had previously seen Father Michael as an immaculate figure, now began to question his true nature. Was he hiding something? As divisions within Oak Ridge intensified, residents' emotions ran high. On one side, there were those who called for justice for Emily, insisting that something terrible had happened and that Father Michael, with his inexplicable closeness to the victim, must be thoroughly investigated. On the other side were those who believed that the priest was a victim of an evil conspiracy, perhaps orchestrated by someone who wanted to destroy his reputation and shake the community's faith. The discussions, which had previously been cordial and discreet, began to become heated. Small conflicts broke out in public places, where inflamed tempers turned any interaction into a potential fight. What once united residents now divided them almost irreparably. Then, an unexpected event occurred, adding more fuel to the fire of distrust that was already burning brightly. During an intensive search of the surrounding area, police found an item of Emily's clothing near a forest trail near the village. The discovery, instead of bringing relief, only increased the feeling that something very dark was about to be revealed. The trail where the piece was found was a place that Father Michael used to frequent on his morning walks, a habit known to everyone. For many, this could not be a coincidence. Suspicion surrounding the priest, which was already high, reached a new level. People began to speak with more conviction, as if that piece of clothing was the missing proof to confirm their worst fears. The impact of this new evidence was devastating to the already fragile piece of Oak Ridge. The village, which was once a place of mutual trust and communion, has turned into a breeding ground for mistrust and fear. People began to avoid church, a clear sign that the faith that once united them was being severely tested. St. Mary's, once a sanctuary of security and spirituality, now seemed an empty and desolate building, its spiritual leader isolated within its walls. Father Michael, who had always been seen as a bastion of strength, was now under constant surveillance, both by the watchful eyes of residents and by the police themselves. The priest, in the midst of this storm, found himself increasingly alone, with his faith and resilience put to the test like never before. He knew he needed to remain calm, but he increasingly questioned how he could restore the trust of a community that had already judged him. The words of comfort that once flowed easily now seemed empty, as the weight of suspicions and unspoken accusations threatened to crush him. In Oak Ridge, everyone was waiting for the truth, but with each new day that passed, it seemed that the truth became darker, hidden in the shadows of distrust and fear that grew in the hearts of each resident. The tension in Oak Ridge had reached an unbearable point. Each new day brought with it more doubts and more distrust, and the pressure on Father Michael finally culminated in an inevitable confrontation. The news that he had been called to give a statement at the police station fell like a bomb in the village, spreading quickly and dominating all conversations. The anticipation was palpable. Everyone wanted to know what would be revealed, and many feared that the worst was about to happen. For the priest, this was the darkest moment of his life. He knew his innocence was at stake, but the circumstantial evidence, however flimsy, seemed to pile up against him like stones thrown by invisible hands. In the interrogation room, the atmosphere was oppressive. The investigator's gaze was cold, analytical, and every word that came out of the priest's mouth was carefully noted, dissected, and evaluated. He repeated once again his declaration of innocence, but the doubt that hung in the air was almost tangible. The pressure was immense, and the priest felt the weight of the community's judgment on his shoulders. He knew that unless there was a turnaround, his reputation and everything he had built over the years would be in ruins. It was during this interrogation that something unexpected happened. In a moment of desperation and honesty, Father Michael decided to reveal a secret he had kept with great effort. He told investigators that, shortly before disappearing, Emily had confided in him that she was being blackmailed by someone within the community. That someone, according to her, was an influential, respected person, someone no one would ever suspect. Emily was terrified, but had no concrete evidence to support her accusation. The priest had tried to help her by advising her to go to the police, but she feared that without proof her word would not be enough. And so, his hands were tied, carrying the burden of knowing something horrible, but being unable to do anything about it. This revelation, instead of bringing immediate relief, cast a new shadow over the case. Investigators now had more questions than answers, and Father Michael's situation seemed more complicated than ever. However, it was exactly at that moment, when everything seemed to be lost, that an unbelievable turn of events occurred. Emily reappeared. His arrival was as unexpected as it was shocking. She was alive but clearly shaken, her eyes revealing the trauma she had experienced. His first stop was the police station, where he asked to speak to investigators. News of his return spread through the village within minutes, bringing with it a mixture of relief and disbelief. After all, what had happened, and why had she disappeared so abruptly? In her testimony, Emily revealed the truth that everyone was eagerly awaiting. She said she had fled Oak Ridge to escape the blackmail and harassment she had been experiencing, fearing for his safety. He decided to hide until he had the courage to face the situation. She explained that the blackmailer was actually an influential member of the community, someone who had the power to ruin her life and the lives of others if their secrets were revealed. For her, running away seemed like the only option at that moment. The revelation of the blackmailer's name shocked everyone. He was a respected figure, someone who was above suspicion, a pillar of the community. The situation has drastically reversed. What was once an investigation focused on Father Michael now turned into a search for the truth that would expose the true intentions of the one everyone believed to be beyond reproach. With this new information, police quickly changed their focus. The clues clearly pointed to the real culprit, and in a direct confrontation, he was finally unmasked. When the police confronted him, the man, instead of turning himself in, tried to flee, perhaps hoping that his position of power would somehow protect him. However, his attempt to escape was brief. The chase, which passed through the narrow streets of Oak Ridge, ended with his capture, and the truth finally came out. The village, which had previously been on the verge of collapse due to distrust and fear, now found itself faced with the harsh reality that evil often hides where it is least expected. Father Michael, although exonerated, bore the scars of the hasty judgment of his own faithful. Emily, in turn, became a symbol of resistance and courage, someone who faced corrupted power and won. As the real culprit was taken away by the police, the community began to reflect on the painful lessons learned. Trust, once broken, was difficult to restore, but the truth had prevailed. Even if painfully, Oak Ridge would never be the same, but justice had finally been served. The conclusion of the investigation brought collective relief to the village of Oak Ridge, but it also left a shadow that would hang over the community for a long time. The blackmailer, finally unmasked, confessed to his crimes after being confronted with the irrefutable evidence and Emily's testimony. His actions had poisoned Oak Ridge's heart, spreading suspicion and mistrust like a silent plague. With the confession, he was brought to justice, and a sense of justice, although late, began to settle among the residents. With the true culprit identified and punished, Father Michael and Emily were officially exonerated of any suspicion. The community, which had previously been divided between accusations and defenders, now faced the harsh reality of the consequences of their hasty judgments. For many, the shock of learning that they had wrongly accused two innocent people was profound. The weight of guilt hung in the air, especially on those who had been the first to cast the invisible stones of rumors. The reorganization process was inevitable, but it would not be easy. Father Michael's return to the pulpit marked a new chapter in the life of the community. He was no longer the same man who, with unshakable confidence, led his faithful with words of comfort and faith. Now there was a caution in his words, a wisdom that only those who go through severe trials can acquire. He understood better than ever the dangers of hasty judgments and the fragility of human trust. As he returned to lead his congregation, he brought with him a powerful message about forgiveness, redemption, and the importance of seeking the truth before giving in to insinuations. His preaching was not just about faith, but about the need to look beyond appearances and question before condemning. The community, in turn, began to unite around this new vision. There was a collective effort to rebuild the shaken faith, not only in the church, but also in each other. Masses, which were once dominated by suspicious looks and murmurs of suspicion, became moments of reflection and healing. However, the wounds were deep, and as with any healing process, some scars would remain. Some villagers still eyed Emily suspiciously, their minds caught up in the echo of the rumors that had once seemed so convincing. The shadow of doubt, although smaller, still hovered over them, and Emily knew that gaining everyone's trust would be a difficult task. However, most residents began to see her in a new light. As a victim of cruel circumstances, someone who had been wrongly accused and who, despite everything, had the courage to face the truth. Little by little, Emily regained her place in the community, albeit with a new awareness of human nature and the dangers of appearances. The episode left an indelible mark on Oak Ridge. Residents began to question the power of rumors, realizing how much a misplaced word can devastate lives. There was a new understanding of the importance of seeking the truth, of not giving in to the temptation to judge before knowing all the facts. This learning was painful but necessary. Discussions in the streets and in homes became more careful, and the village, once so eager for a new story, became a place where words were chosen with more wisdom and responsibility. As time passed, Oak Ridge gradually returned to its normal routine, but nothing would be the same as before. The scars left by recent events would serve as a reminder to future generations, a silent warning about the dangers of hasty judgment and the consequences of mistrust. Residents understood that the true strength of a community lies not only in the faith they share, but in the ability to come together, even in times of crisis. Father Michael, now wiser and more experienced, continued his mission of guiding the community, but with a more attentive and humble heart. He knew that despite the difficulties, there was an opportunity to rebuild, to create an environment where faith and truth went hand in hand. His experience had shaped not only his leadership, but also the very soul of Oak Ridge. The community, although marked by events, emerged stronger, with a deeper understanding of itself and its values. So Oak Ridge moved forward, carrying the lessons of the past as it moved toward a more conscious future. The village that was once shaken by secrets and mistrust found, amid its scars, a new purpose: to be a place where truth and faith finally could coexist in harmony. Oak Ridge's story is a grim portrait of the dangers of hasty judgment and the deep scars it can leave on a community. In a village where everyone knew each other and trust was a foundation of relationships, one rumor was enough for everything to start falling apart. Emily Carter's disappearance and the subsequent distrust surrounding Father Michael have exposed the weaknesses hidden beneath Oak Ridge's calm surface. The tragedy lay not only in the events that occurred, but also in the devastating consequences of a community that, for a moment, forgot the values that sustained it. The rumors, which began as mere speculation, soon turned into a destructive force, undermining the faith, trust, and peace that once reigned in Oak Ridge. Whispers on street corners and suspicious looks replaced cordiality and solidarity. The village found itself divided between those who rushed to judgment and condemnation, and the few who maintained their faith in the innocence of the priest and Emily. However, the damage was already done. Suspicion seeped into every home, into every conversation, like a poison that slowly eroded the foundations of a once close-knit community. When the truth finally came to light, bringing with it justice, the sense of relief was accompanied by a bitter recognition of what had been lost. The blackmailer, who manipulated the situation to hide his own moral failings, was unmasked and brought to justice. Father Michael and Emily were exonerated, but the marks of distrust remained. The community, which had been built around faith and mutual trust, now found itself forced to confront the effects of its own mistakes. Justice prevailed, but the question that hung in the air was, at what cost? The revelation of the true culprit brought some closure, but it also forced the residents of Oak Ridge to reflect on their own actions. Those who had rushed to judgment felt the weight of guilt, while those who had been victims of gossip and slander wondered if they could ever truly forgive those who betrayed them. St. Mary's Church, once a sanctuary of peace and spiritual refuge, has become a symbol of the destructive power of rumors. Father Michael's return to the pulpit was marked by a mix of relief and sadness. He, more than anyone, understood that the community's faith had been shaken and that the reconstruction process would be long and difficult. His sermons, previously full of words of comfort, now included warnings about the dangers of judging oneself hastily, about the importance of seeking the truth before letting oneself be carried away by appearances. Emily, once a discreet, almost invisible figure, has become a living reminder of the consequences of a community that has allowed itself to be dominated by fear and distrust. Although some still viewed her with some reserve, most residents began to see her as a victim of circumstances beyond her control. His courage in facing the truth, even in the face of so much suffering, inspired many to reflect on their own behaviors and to reconsider the power that words can have. Oak Ridge would never be the same. The tranquility that once defined the village has been replaced by a new awareness, a deeper understanding of the dangers that lurk when trust is broken and rumors are allowed to flourish. Conversations that were once trivial and carefree now carried the weight of what could happen if words were misinterpreted or used with malice. Residents learned painfully that justice, although necessary, cannot erase the scars left by mistrust. Oak Ridge's story serves as a powerful reminder that true evil does not always come from without, but can originate within a community's own walls. It is a warning about the destructive power of hasty judgment and the devastating consequences that a simple rumor can cause. In the end, although justice prevailed, the cost was high. The community was forced to confront its own failings, recognize the fragility of its bonds, and work hard to rebuild what had been lost. The lessons learned at Oak Ridge would echo for generations, serving as a warning to all who heard the story. The village continued to exist. Its routines eventually returned to normal, but the scars remained visible and invisible, reminding everyone that trust is a fragile treasure, easy to break and difficult to restore. And so, Oak Ridge moved forward with a new purpose and a renewed faith, but also with a painful awareness of the consequences of its past mistakes.